welcome to Brothers of the Word, because, brother, you need the Word. And today, I want to start with the book of Daniel, the New Living Translation. And I'm going to be reading chapter 5 of the book of Daniel. Many years later, King Belshazzar gave a great feast for 1,000 of his nobles, and he drank wine with them. While Belshazzar was drinking the wine, he gave orders to bring in the gold and silver cups that his predecessor Nebuchadnezzar had taken from the temple in Jerusalem. He wanted to drink from them with his nobles, his wives, and his concubines. So they brought these gold cups taken from the temple, the house of God in Jerusalem, and the king and his nobles, his wives, and his concubines drank from them. While they drank from them, they praised their idols made of gold, silver, bronze, iron, wood, and stone. Suddenly they saw the fingers of a human hand writing on the plaster wall of the king's palace near the lampstand. The king himself saw the hand as it wrote, and his face turned pale with fright. His knees knocked together in fear, and his legs gave way beneath him. Now, I just wanted to pause there for a second just to give you a picture of this, of what happened to the king. This is equivalent to the president of the United States. This is the most powerful man in the land. As a matter of fact, he is more powerful than the president of the United States because the king in that day had absolute authority. Now the president got to go through the Supreme Court and go through the Congress and the House of Representatives, all of that. No, king didn't have all of that. The king had absolute authority. If you offended the king and the king didn't like you, the king could just say, put that man to death right now. And that was it. No trial, no nothing. So here was a man with absolute authority. And it says, as the king himself saw the hand, first of all, his face turned pale. I mean, just turned white as a ghost. His face turned pale with fright. Have you all ever been so scared that the blood just drained out your face? Just said his face turned pale with fright. His knees start knocking together. I mean, can you imagine the president of the United States? Something scared him so bad that his knees just start knocking together in fear, and his legs gave way beneath him, which means he fell down. So when the king Belshazzar saw this writing on the wall, his face turned white, his knees started knocking together, and then he fell down. Have any of y'all ever been that scared? I have never been anywhere close to that scared. So here was the most powerful man in the land, and this thing scared him so bad that he literally could not stand up. The king shouted for the enchanters, astrologers, and fortune tellers to be brought before him. He said to these wise men of Babylon, "Whoever can read this writing and tell me what it means will be dressed in purple robes of royal honor and will have a gold chain placed around his neck. He will become the third highest ruler in the kingdom." But when all of the king's wise men had come in, none of them could read the writing or tell him what it meant. So the king grew even more alarmed, and his face turned pale. He got even scareder. Now, I don't know how much scareder you can get than your face turning pale, but it said it turned even more pale, so it got even whiter. So his face got more pale. He got scareder than falling down. But when all of the king's men had come in and none of them could tell him, he grew even more alarmed. His face turned pale. His nobles, too, were shaken. But when the queen mother heard what was happening, she hurried to the banquet hall. I want you to remember who this is. Now, the queen mother. This was his mother. So when his mother heard what was happening, see, even a king got a mama. And sometimes when The son can't fix, no matter how powerful, no matter how wise, no matter how rich, no matter how educated, sometimes mama know best. So here the queen mother heard what was happening. She hurried to the banquet hall. She said to Belshazzar, "Long live the king. Don't be so pale and frightened. There is a man in your kingdom who has within him the spirit of the holy gods. During Nebuchadnezzar's reign, this man was found to have insight, understanding, and wisdom like that of the gods. Your predecessor, King Nebuchadnezzar, made him chief over all of the magicians, enchanters, astrologers, and fortune tellers of Babylon. This man, Daniel, whom the king named Belteshazzar, has exceptional ability and is filled with divine knowledge and understanding. He can interpret dreams, explain riddles, and solve difficult problems. Call for Daniel, and he will tell you what the writing means." So Daniel was brought in before the king. The king asked him, "Are you Daniel, one of the exiles brought from Judah by my predecessor, King Nebuchadnezzar? I have heard that you have the spirit of the gods within you, and that you are filled with insight, understanding, and wisdom. My wise men and enchanters have tried to read the words on the wall and tell me their meaning, but they cannot do it. I am told that you can give interpretations and solve difficult problems. If you can read these words and tell me their meaning, you will be clothed in purple robes of royal honor, and you will have a gold chain placed around your neck. You will become the third highest ruler in the kingdom." Daniel answered the king, "Keep your gifts or give them to someone else, but I will tell you what the writing means." Now, this is another level that we don't have today. Today, if you tell a preacher or a prophet, "Look, man, tell me what this means, and I'll give you $100,000. All of them today, none of them going to say, no, I'm not going to take your money. See, this is what Elisha did with Naaman when he brought him all that stuff to heal him of his leprosy. He said, "I'm not going to take anything." And he brought him in. I explained it in a sermon. I counted up how much. There was millions. He brought him millions. The prophet said, no. I'm not going to take anything. Daniel said, "Nope. You get that to somebody else, but I will tell you what it means. Your Majesty, the Most High God, gave sovereignty, majesty, glory, and honor to your predecessor, Nebuchadnezzar. He made him so great that people of all races and nations and languages trembled before him in fear. He killed those he wanted to kill and spared those he wanted to spare. He honored those he wanted to honor and disgraced those he wanted to disgrace. But when his heart and mind were puffed up with arrogance, he was brought down from his royal throne and stripped of his glory. He was driven from human society. He was given the mind of a wild animal, and he lived among the wild donkeys. He ate grass like a cow, and he was drenched with the dew of heaven until he learned that the Most High God rules over the kingdoms of the world and appoints anyone who desires to rule over them. You are his successor, O Belshazzar, and you knew all of this. Yet you have not humbled yourself, for you have proudly defied the Lord of heaven and have had these cups from his temple brought before you. You and your nobles and your wives and concubines have been drinking wine from them while praising gods of silver, gold, bronze, iron, wood, and stone, gods that neither see nor hear nor know anything at all. Now, I want to emphasize what Daniel told Belshazzar. He said, you knew all this. He said, you knew all this because you knew what happened to Nebuchadnezzar. Do you know who Nebuchadnezzar was to Belshazzar? That was his daddy. He said, you knew what happened because you saw what happened to your daddy. And you're doing the same thing your daddy did. Your daddy, God built him up, gave him the power. He became so proud and arrogant because he could kill who he wanted to kill, spare who he wanted to spare, honor who he wanted to honor, or disgrace who he wanted to disgrace. You saw all of this, and you saw God bring your daddy down because of his pride and arrogance. and you haven't learned from what your daddy went through. But you have not honored the God who gives you the breath of life and controls your destiny. So God has sent this hand to write this message. This is the message that was written. Mene, tekel, and parson. This is what these words mean. Mene means numbered. God has numbered the days of your reign and has brought it to an end. Tekel means weighed. You have been weighed on the balances and have not measured up. Parson means divided. Your kingdom has been divided and given to the Medes and Persians. Then at Belshazzar's command, Daniel was dressed in purple robes, a gold chain was hung around his neck, and he was proclaimed the third highest ruler in the kingdom. That very night, Belshazzar, the Babylonian king, was killed, and Darius the Mede took over the kingdom at the age of 62. Now, I am in the middle of a series entitled Contentment. And when God told me to preach this series, I was there with my son George, and I was led to just let George give me the title of each of the letters or the meaning or word, each of the letters of the word contentment. And C was care, O was opinion, N was new, T was time, E was excessive, N was neighbor, and the last message, T was totality. And today is M. And for the letter M, George spoke the word measure. Mene, tekel, parson. You have been weighed or measured and found wanting in the balance. Measure. King Belshazzar was mene, tekel, parson. Numbered, measured, and then divided. So I want to ask you the question today from this title of contentment and measure. How do you measure up? If you had to be measured or judged today, how would you measure up? Now, one of the things with Nebuchadnezzar, and this is why the queen mother was brought in, that was Nebuchadnezzar's wife. That was his mother. So she remembered what happened with her husband. That's why she said, go call Daniel. Because this is the man who explained to my husband what his dream meant. And he explained to my husband what his dream meant. It happened exactly like he said. Go get this man, bring him in. He'll tell you what those words on the wall mean. And Daniel said, did not you remember what happened to your daddy? And you're doing the same thing. And people, I have learned not to judge. Because it's not easy. See, first of all, King Belshazzar was having a feast. He was having a feast with his nobles, with his wives, and with his concubines, which means he had wives, which means he had a minimum of 2 wives. He had concubines, which means he had a minimum of 2 concubines. So he had a minimum of 4 women. Now, from what I have read, when you have multiple women, they get in competition. And when you got multiple women and you have the power of life and death over the women, and they're in competition, they don't ever tell you anything bad. They puff you up. Oh, great king. When they come in to see the king, and they don't ever ask the king to take out the garbage. Oh! When they come in to see the king, it's, oh, great king, your majesty, oh, your greatness, your highness. All that stuff puffs up the king. And I must admit, you're going to talk different to a man who has the power to say, to order your death right there on the spot if you offend him. Nobody going to offend the king. So all of these people surrounding him, all of his wives and his concubines just praising him and building up day by day by day. All of this, it's hard not to get puffed up. And then King Nebuchadnezzar said with him, when you read the 4th chapter of Daniel, which describes what happened with King Nebuchadnezzar, he said he looked out over Babylon and he said, look at all of what I have built. This is the most fabulous city on the face of the earth. Look what I have built. And people, if you built an empire, if you got folk all around you just praising you night and day, not telling you, your breath can stink and they won't tell you. Because you may have them killed. So they're going to say, oh, king, even your breath is so fragrant and floral. And it's stinking up a storm. They won't tell you because you have the power to affect their fate and their life. Therefore, they defer to the king and they only tell the king good stuff. I was on a trip once and we were walking through a mall with another fella. And he said, "Woo, I can't stand these masks." And, you know, COVID had everybody with masks. I just hate these masks. I said, "Well, the masks, they're not that bad." He said, "I just hate these masks. I can't stand these masks." I said, "Well, you're just not that bad. I mean, they're not all that hard to breathe. I just can't stand." I said, "Man, why you don't like the mask so much?" He said, "'Cause my breath's stinking." So see, sometimes if you're the king, now he could smell his own breath, and maybe if the king had on a mask, he'd have known, but nobody's going to tell the king. So I understand how a man in this position with everyone just praising him all of the time, it's not hard to get puffed up. It's not hard to lose your humility. It's not hard to be arrogant and prideful. And some of you right there, if you were in that position, it would not be long before you would go to thinking, you know, I am all that. I do look really, really good. Yes, I am extremely wise. Yeah, I am powerful. I am great. It wouldn't be long when everybody is praising, and it wouldn't be long. That's why even God told me, he said, one day you'll have the power to raise the dead, but that's not your problem. Your problem is going to be handling the pride that goes along with it. Because I can understand that. You don't need to raise a whole lot of dead folk. All you got to do is just raise 1 or 2 dead folk. Because ain't nobody else raising nobody dead. Nobody else is doing any dead raising. So all you have to do is raise 1 or 2. And see, Elijah, I got to get back to where we start heading back to the funeral home, because I remember the last time that happened, and I was with C. Elijah and James, and they remember what happened. That's why C. Elijah, I said, "Man, we need to go on over there to the funeral home now. We need to go on to the funeral home." And both James and C. Elijah, "Oh, nobody going to the funeral home now." They don't know about that. I said, "We need to go to the funeral home." And we got the message they'd already embalmed, and once we heard that, C. Elijah, "That's it, now we can't go. That's it." So, but if you had the power to raise the dead, folk would not see God. They would only see you. And folk would come at your feet and fall down at your feet and say, "Please just touch me. Just pray over me." And it wouldn't be long before you'd have an issue with pride. So that's what I don't judge Belshazzar, because I can understand a man in that position long enough. It's hard to stay humble when everybody's bowing down to you, when everybody's telling you how great you are, when you can look at your bank account and just see it all through the roof, when you can look at your stuff and just see stuff just climb. It's hard to stay humble. And we forget it is God who gave me this. It is God who gave me the ability. It is God who gave me the opportunity. It is God who put me in this position. But we forget that so easy. So it's not ridiculous with Belshazzar of what happened to him. So how do I measure myself. First of all, don't measure yourself against others. That's number one. And that's often the first tendency that we'll have is let me see or let me compare myself against somebody else. Don't measure yourself. One of my favorite pieces of poetry is a poem called Desiderata. And it says, compare not yourself with others, lest you become vain and bitter, because there will always be those greater and lesser than yourself. If you compare yourself with somebody else, you're going to sooner or later find somebody greater than you, and you're going to find somebody lesser than you. And if you look at the person greater than you, you become bitter because you say, look what they got. If you look at the person lesser than you, become vain because you say, look at what I got. So don't compare yourself with others. God has given everybody different gifts. He's given them different destinies. He's given them different opportunities. Some people were born in different situations. Don't compare yourself with others because you don't know what someone else has been given. And number two, you don't know somebody else's situation. So I was just led strong about even social media. A lot of people were following me on the trip, and they were saying, oh, I wish I could do that, and I wish I had this, But you don't know what folk go. You can't go by what's going on social media and what folk talk about. You don't know what's going on in them folks' lives. Because all of the stuff on social media is our highlight reels. You don't know what's going on in folks' life. Folk will be sitting there holding hands, talking about how good, and the minute they come off the Facebook and slap each other aside, you don't know what's going on in folks' lives. And they have all this wonderful stuff on social media, and that stuff sometimes, and it may be true, but it's not the whole truth, because they don't tell you about the negative stuff. So when you compare yourself with others, and when you look, and the other thing about it is once you reach a certain level, that level becomes normalized. It no longer particularly, that's why you cannot get joy out of stuff, because once it gets to it's normal. Once you move to a big house, everybody in that neighborhood got a big house. I got a mansion. I live in a mansion. But when I walk out my door, it's a house across the street twice the size of mine. So that makes my mansion look small because that one is twice the size of mine. So it will get to be a problem if you ever compare yourself against others. So number one, don't measure yourself against others. You measure yourself against what God has told you to do and what his word has led you to do. So don't compare yourself with others. Number two, don't measure yourself against the past. A lot of us will get messed up. If I ask you to measure, then you go, oh, Pastor, you just don't know what I've done. No, I don't. I don't know what you've done. God knows what you've done. That's what forgiveness is all about. That's what salvation is all about, of wiping that stuff in the past clean. And the other thing about it, you can't do one thing about what happened yesterday. You can't do anything. Matter of fact, you can't do one thing about what happened 10 minutes ago. You cannot change the past. So don't compare yourself with somebody else, and don't worry about what has happened in the past. You cannot change the past. The only thing you can do is measure, and I'm going to give you just a real simple key about measurement and what I'm going to direct you to measure. You measure where you are when you wake up and the progress you have made between when you wake up in the morning and when you go to sleep at night. You handle that thing day by day by day. When you wake up in the morning, you know what God has led you to do. When you wake up in the morning, you make a declaration every single morning. I am going to do today what God has told me to do and what I know in wisdom I ought to do. You wake up with that declaration. I am going to do, not yesterday, because more than likely you may have messed up yesterday. And you wake up with a regret. You wake up with you put yourself down. Oh, I just messed all up yesterday. I just do. Don't work. You wake up every day with this fresh on you. I am going to do today what God has directed me to do and what wisdom tells me to do. And if you do that, see, some of you may not have specific direction from God, but you got wisdom. And you know what wisdom has directed you to do. So when you wake up every morning, you wake up with, that's what you measure. You measure day by day by day. And if you do right day by day by day, your weeks start going right, your months go right, your years go right, and before you know it, when you get to the point in life when you can look back, you measured up well. So you live day by day by day because that's all you can do. You cannot change the past, and you don't know what's going in the future, but you can handle right now. You can handle what you do this day, from the time you open your eyes in the morning to the time you close them at night. And some of y'all just even need to open them at the right time and close them at the right time. God has given me that instruction. So I'm supposed to go to sleep by a certain time, and I'm supposed to wake up at a certain time. So even how you starting in your day. And some of you say, well, God had not told me that, but you got some sense with it. You know good and well you ain't supposed to be going to bed at 3 o'clock in the morning. You don't need God to tell you, child, you should not go to bed at 3 o'clock in the morning. You don't need God to tell you that. So that's why I said, you have wisdom, and then you have divine direction. So I know from divine direction, I'm supposed to be in prayer at 10 p.m. every night. I'm supposed to be in the bed by 11. I'm up at 5. And somebody said, Pastor, that ain't but 6 hours of sleep. I'm fine as long as but I also got to get my workout. As long as I keep my body in tip-top shape, I don't need but 6 hours of sleep. If I start getting out of shape, I need more sleep. So if I do what God tells me to do, life has a funny way of going a whole lot smoother, and I'm a whole lot happier. So this contentment of just measuring yourself, not with anybody else, not compared with anybody else, because it's gonna be some folk they just gonna have more stuff than you. They're gonna see Elijah just laugh so. He look like he's just so happy. He look like he's just so happy. And I could get all upset about that time. I just ain't happy to see Elijah. I just don't laugh as much as I just ain't happy. Now, see Elijah don't look like he got anything wrong, anything going on in his life. But you don't know what's going on with see Elijah. I don't know what's going on with see Elijah. So see Elijah may be just as happy as he can be. Ain't nothing going on in his life. And see Elijah, I don't know what's going on with see. The only person I'm absolutely sure about what's going on in their life is me. I don't even know what's going on in all my children's lives or my wife's life. The only person I know of what's going on for sure is me. And if I can get me straight, the world just seems to go a whole lot smoother. So how do you measure yourself? From the minute you wake up, you simply say to yourself, I am going to do today what God in wisdom has directed me to do. And you close your eyes at night, have I done that for today? Wake up in the morning, and if I didn't do it today, let me get it done first thing tomorrow. So if you handle that on a day-by-day basis, you'll find that life will go a whole lot smoother. And I started off just talking about the children and the youth in the church and how well they were doing. And I just saw in this story how stuff flows from parent to child. And see, when the Bible says that Belshazzar, when he died, and he died right then, when he died, another king took his place who was not his son. Because Belshazzar did not have a son. He only had one child. The one child he had was a daughter. That daughter was named Vashti. For those of you who know the story in the book of Esther, Vashti was the queen who would not honor and obey the king. Nebuchadnezzar wouldn't do right by God. Belshazzar wouldn't do right by God. Vashti wouldn't do right by her husband. They went right on down the line. None of them would obey those in authority and honor above them. Simple as that. So when I saw that and I looked back and I saw just the genealogy and how this thing carried through, we influence our seed tremendously. But our seed watches us. And Belshazzar only took after the negative part of his daddy. That's another thing that we have a tendency to do. We kind of it's easy to take after. You know, if you got 10 good things and one bad, that bad one just stick out, and that's what folk will follow. I don't know if it was this movie was called Meet the Fockers, and it was the kid was, the daddy or the uncle was taking care of the baby, and the baby had never said a single word. And he was and somehow he cursed. And the minute he cursed, the baby just started repeating his curse word. And he's just trying to get him to shut up, wait a minute. And that's all he would repeat once again. He'd been doing all this talking all this time. He said one curse word, and that's all the baby started saying. The baby just went to repeating over and over and over and over this curse word. So sometimes, no matter how much good it is, it's the negative that folk will latch on to fastest. And then you can't be perfect. But the better the example that you portray, and the better your children will be. And had Nebuchadnezzar been constantly giving honor and praise to God, I don't believe Belshazzar would have gotten off track. But he saw his daddy, and he followed his daddy. And then his daughter saw her daddy, and she got off track. And it went right down the bloodline. Contentment measure. How do you measure yourself? When you wake up in the morning, simply make this declaration. Today I am going to do what God and wisdom has directed me to do. I thank you for joining us today at Brothers of the Word. You can go to brothersoftheword.com and listen to the entire series on contentment. Thank you for joining us today at Brothers of the Word, because, brother, you need the Word.